Bonjour and welcome to French Footprints, the podcast sharing steps you can take towards raising bilingual children. I'm your host, Amy Mann, founder of Un de Trois Petits Pas, where I teach parents and children how to introduce French at home in fun, engaging, and accessible ways. Through Canadian Parents for French and funding from the Government of Canada, the French Footprints program shares research-based techniques and expertise to help build the confidence of parents and better the future of their kids. When we think about preparing our little ones for French immersion or FSL learning, we often focus solely on vocabulary and grammar. But early numeracy, how children begin to understand numbers, patterns, and basic problem solving, can also benefit French language acquisition. So in this episode, I met with Katherine Caalim, a bilingual education specialist from Let's Talk Science, where we'll explore how parents can support early math thinking in French at home. With a strong background in bilingual education and curriculum design, Katherine will help us understand why learning French through other educational themes like science and numeracy can make language learning more natural, relevant, and engaging for our young learners. So, thank you so much for joining me for this chat today, Katherine.
Thank you so much, Amy.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm really happy to have this important conversation with you.
Yeah, it's a really unique topic, and I think it's something that parents maybe haven't considered before. You know, they're always thinking about the language aspect of language learning. But numeracy, there's so much we can do, so I'm really excited to dive into this. So to start, why is early numeracy a valuable and often overlooked gateway into French learning?
So early numeracy and science are such a valuable gateway into French learning because it gives children a way to use language in real and really meaningful contexts. It's less about memorizing words and more about using them while doing something that matters to the child. So that connection makes the French language feel more natural and helps children better understand what they're saying. This can also really help with their confidence as well.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting what you just said, because often I find when we teach language, but through other means, such as, counting and whatnot, it's almost like they're being distracted from the fact that they're learning a language because their brain is thinking about the other things. So it is really cool to see how they can engage more that way. And it also is just a different opportunity for them to use those second language skills. So that said, what would you say are some easy, age-appropriate ways parents can introduce French numeracy at home?
I think something that parents need to really remember, especially as a teacher, is that French numeracy doesn't just mean, memorizing the numbers or lots of worksheets. And it's really nice to know that students can really learn more from those hands-on type activities. So, for example, that learning can happen just from routines at home. You're climbing up the steps, and then you say to your child, how many steps do we have here to get to your room? Un, deux, trois. Let's just count together. And it makes it more meaningful and fun.
And you're implementing it into their life already versus you really having a big focus on let's sit down and, do some math.
Exactly. You don't want to force them to memorize those numbers. You want them to see them and hear them naturally.
Exactly. I love that. When it comes to other aspects of numeracy, like your patterning and your shapes, what are some ways that parents can try and fit that into daily life?
How about snack time, right? Because you are going to be preparing snacks constantly, as we know. For example, you can say, oh, combien de pommes veux-tu? Est-ce que la pomme est un cercle ou un carré? Just asking the child to kind of look for those patterns to see, oh, I see there's 3 red apples. Maybe there's 2 green ones over here. How do we continue that pattern? Looking for those shapes naturally. If you're courageous and really want to get into maybe meal prep or cooking, asking the child, how many cups do we need? On a besoin combien de tasses ici? Just those repetitive ways of kind of pulling in the ingredients that they might see all the time would really help them make that connection between the patterns that occur naturally in their home. And if you really want to kind of take it to the next level, you could even go outside. Let's look for those patterns and shapes now in nature. and that's still keeping that numeracy relevant for them and fun.
It's reminding me of something I like to do with my 3-year-old right now, where we really like, veggie straws, and you know how they're, like,
Yes.
green and orange and yellow? So we've been making patterns with those veggie straws, and I find it, like, yeah, when you implement learning in a way that they don't even really recognize it, you know, it makes such a difference rather than, "Let's sit down and do this." It's
Absolutely.
just like, Let's just throw it in there." So I love especially snack time. I find snack time is perfect time for language learning, and then obviously that makes sense for numeracy as well. Um, why would you say inquiry-based and hands-on approaches are especially helpful at this young age?
So, inquiry and just hands on learning in general is really beneficial for young children, especially when they're learning another language like French. And I've seen this both as a classroom teacher and through the work that I do with Let's Talk Science. Basically, inquiry is driven by the child. So when they're asking questions, exploring, and they're given the opportunity to figure things out on their own versus having to memorize information or just receiving information from the adult, they're going to really understand more and make those connections on their own. Having the vocabulary in French to describe using new words, that's where the learning is really going to stick. So a good example of that at home would be, you just have a bowl full of water and you can ask your child, do you think it's going to sink or float? And in French, you would say something like, qu'est-ce que tu remarques? Right? Just asking, like, what do you notice? Is the water wet? Is this water cold? What object should we try? Is it going to sink or is it going to float? And just open ended questions encourage the observation. Then it encourages more prediction and reasoning, which is super valuable and really necessary for future skills.
And if we wanted to throw that into daily routines, bath time is the perfect time for a flat ou cool. Now, the majority of our listeners, they don't have much French confidence when it comes to speaking themselves. Do you have any tips regarding how they could still support numeracy in French without quite being fluent?
So, if you're a non French speaking parent, supporting numeracy in French might feel a little bit intimidating, but there's lots of ways to make it work without being fluent. One thing I always would suggest as a teacher, and even now as a parent to fellow parents, would be open and willing to learn alongside your child. So my husband is
Mm.
Anglophone, and this is something that we've been doing since my children have been born. And it's just, counting together, and really simple phrases are accessible even if you don't fully understand the French language. There's a lot of different entry points where you can build confidence alongside your child. So, for example, if your child is sorting objects, which we know kids love to do naturally, right? Or they're looking for shapes around the house, you can use really simple and open-ended prompts. Montre-moi, pourquoi. My husband only speaks English, but he has adopted those phrases and he's able to use them in so many different contexts. And just by starting his sentence in French, it encourages my children to continue with all of the vocabulary that they know.
It's funny. So my husband is the same situation. So I speak French to my kids. He speaks English to them. And he definitely, although he doesn't understand much French as a whole, he's picked up on these little words and phrases that he hears us use all the time. And so he will just naturally say something like no merci, you know what I mean? Like, and it might have an accent, but it doesn't matter, right? You're showing the child that you're willing to learn, you're willing to use it, and it's just making them feel like, okay, you can do it, so I can do it too. So I love that. That's really interesting that you are in the same boat with your family at home.
And it's probably so common, right? Especially with the
Hmm.
growth of French immersion and even just core French within all of our schools. It it's probably something that a lot of families are dealing with, the hesitancy to put their child in the program not speaking the language themselves at home. And as a teacher, I would encourage everyone. The language is for everyone. Everyone has the right to learn French, and you only really need a little bit of support at home and trust that a lot will happen in school, right?
Exactly. Now, when it comes to numeracy specifically, That's something that they can support. Let's say you've got a child who's headed to French immersion. That's something you could still recognize, hey, they're doing this in French, but could they not also then practice it in whatever their native language is as well? And that really supports and complements it. So when it comes to parents who just maybe aren't comfortable speaking French, but they have a child who's, either headed to French immersion or in French immersion, and they would really like to support their numeracy, is that something that they can do even if in school they might be doing it in French, but at home, can they do it in their native tongue?
Absolutely. There is, of course, a connection between learning a second and a third language. And numeracy, the numbers, right? We see them everywhere. That language will just enhance your understanding. So even if you just have a deck of cards at home, right? And let's say you're speaking Spanish and you know how to explain to your child, perhaps in English and Spanish, this is number 5. Then you can make the connection to sank, grab some objects, make it visual, make it interactive. Absolutely. There's so many connections you can make to French, English, and other languages that are still going to foster those important early numeracy skills, and while also encouraging the child to drive the inquiry and to have their curiosity.
So when it comes to getting some kind of French input that might be from somewhere else, there's obviously a lot of resources available nowadays. Do you have any recommendations for parents?
There are lots of educational apps made for younger learners in French that are pretty user friendly. Of course, you have to kind of use screen time at your discretion and what fits for your family. But if you're looking to kind of find other resources, a lot of times there are things available within your community. Libraries often have French story time once or twice a week. You can also find French TV shows. It's pretty easy if you're using, a subscription video service like Netflix to toggle the French language off and on, even putting the closed captioning and, saying to your child, hey, let's look for 1 or 2 words that we might already know. There's lots of music available, which is wonderful. And maybe you can even find a podcast. Like we're so blessed that we live in a bilingual country that there are lots of resources available. Sometimes it's a little bit trickier to track down depending on where you're located, but I would definitely say that the library is a good place to start.
You're so right. We are very lucky. And especially nowadays, we've got so many resources at our disposal, right? And especially being Canadian, where we have our 2 official languages, there's a lot more resources and a lot more funding, I find, that's being put towards ensuring that everybody has that opportunity. And we've also got with the French Footprints initiative that we have here, we've got our parent resource hub that lists off apps and ideas. And so there's a lot there for parents as well. But thank you so much for joining me today, Katherine. Before you go, do you have any final thoughts, any resources, anything that you'd like to share about Let's Talk Science with our listeners?
One thing I really want to emphasize is that learning French as a second language isn't just about memorizing vocabulary or doing language drills. You can weave French into math, science, and other subjects to make it more engaging and more meaningful. And that's something that I really appreciate about Let's Talk Science. All of our resources are bilingual, so parents easily can switch between English and French. And it really gives you the flexibility to support your child's learning in the way that works best for your family. And in case you're not familiar, Let's Talk Science is a national charitable organization that supports learning in STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, from the early years through high school. So all of our resources are free and designed to really build curiosity, confidence, and real world skills needed for the future. We do also offer free professional learning for both educators and parents who want to explore inquiry based approaches and hands on learning. And through our partnership with the Canadian Child Care Federation, we're committed to making sure our programs are meaningful and accessible for young children and the adults who support them. And if you need more information, our website is letstalkscience.ca.
That seems like such an incredible resource. The fact that they've got all of those, you've got the educators covered, you've got the parents, you've got the children. The 2 languages, that's amazing. So thank you so much again, Katherine, for joining me today on French Footprints. It has been really inspiring to be able to think about all of these things that we can do really quite easily to support our children with their numeracy skills.
Thank you so much for having me. And I really appreciate the opportunity to kind of share what it is I do and how our mission is really just to reach students across Canada.
So for our listeners, FSL learning isn't limited to language drills. Math and science can be part of the journey too, adding diversity to learning French. Thank you so much for spending time with us on French Footprints. No matter your experience level, introducing French at home can be simple, fun, and effective. Keep listening as we continue to take steps towards a bilingual future. Au revoir!
This project has been made possible by the Government of Canada. Ce projet a été rendu possible grâce au gouvernement du Canada.